It has never been more important that we have more upstate voices in the majority conference in Albany advocating for our communities. Thank you. I mean, this is really the most pivotal question of our time right now. I don't believe that we can run our state on an austerity budget. Absolutely not. The federal government needs to step up. It needs to give us the funds. But until it does that, we need to be more creative about the revenue measures that we have in our state. I don't support any tax increases across middle class families or working families. I do, though, support a increase on multimillionaires and billionaires who live in the state. Many of them have made $400 billion more during this pandemic, while the rest of us are just trying to figure out if we have a job in 2 weeks and how to put food on the table. We're seeing this happen already in states around us. So it's not like they're moving to New Jersey because these things are happening everywhere right now. New York is an incredibly special state. People want to live here. We want to do business here. It's about time that they pay their fair share. I also support other revenue measures, things like legalizing cannabis. While it's estimated $300 million is not enough to fill the gap, it is $300 million that we need and that we should be getting, not to mention the economic development impacts that it could have in upstate New York, the types of positive impacts it can have for our agriculture community, as well as for our environment. If we use industrialized hemp, with the legalization of cannabis, we could revolutionize we could get rid of plastics, right? We could revolutionize possible job development here in upstate New York, which will help tremendously. So I think that we need to be more creative as well about the revenue measures that we're looking at and be really forward thinking to make sure that we can bring money back into the state. Because as you said, we're not moving forward right now, thankfully, on a 20% cut, but that is not guaranteed that won't change going forward. So we desperately need, as a state, to be bringing more money into our government.
When you said you favored the multi-millionaires tax, I mean, what's that dollar figure that you favor it on?
I have to look. I mean, I think they're multimillionaires and billionaires in general, I think should definitely be paying significantly more.
There's a big difference between someone who makes 2 million and someone who makes, 15. So I mean, that's why I'm wondering where.
Sure. I mean, we can say people over $10 million, definitely.
Yeah.
And then looking at where people live, depending, but starting there with people who can afford it.
Mm-hmm. Is there also an issue now because people, I mean, I've been working at home now for 7 months. This pandemic has kind of proven that a lot of people can work from almost anywhere. Could there be an issue of that actual? I know that there are studies that have proven that when it happened in New Jersey, that actually didn't happen. People didn't actually leave the state. However, now that people can work from anywhere, could that be a real possibility? I mean, is there a possibility? Is that something you have to be cognizant of pushing companies and people away now, since we could, especially these types of knowledge jobs and these types of white collar jobs that can be done from anywhere?
I think we're seeing people working from all over our state too. You don't have to necessarily be in Manhattan now to work in those jobs, and you can have a better quality of life living in our communities. And so no, I think that yes, we have to take everything into consideration, but no, I don't think it's going to have a major impact in where those people live. And I think it's actually going to increase quality of life for many people who are able to live anywhere in our state. As I said, we're seeing so many more people moving out of the city into Ulster County, into Greene County, into more rural areas, which actually, if anything, is helpful. I mean, bringing young kids into our school system is so important. Bringing more young families into our communities is a really great thing. We have to make sure that they're participating in our tax structures, et cetera, but that's going to be helping our communities. And so, no, I don't think that that's going to be driving them out further and into other places. We've spent a lot of time talking to both members of our communities, as well as law enforcement. We've talked to chiefs, we've talked to sheriffs, we've talked to rank and file. No matter who you are, everybody agrees that the system was broken and things need to change. I don't think no matter who you are can look at those videos that we've seen over the last few months and not think something was wrong. What's really exciting, though, for our communities is that a lot of our smaller police departments are actually taking really innovative steps. If you look at the town of Lloyd, for instance, and what they're doing, they're already doing a lot of community outreach, trying to build and strengthen ties in the community by having different coffee clutches, inviting community members in to sit and talk with them, to when they patrol, having ice cream cards that they're giving to kids to make sure that they can build that trust and to build that relationship. We need to make sure that we are absolutely providing more funding to root causes of many issues. We need to make sure that we are providing more funding for housing, for more funding for mental health services. We need to have social workers more on call to go to calls where there may not need to be a use of force. Mental health services, especially addiction services, are things that we need to be expanding. At the same time, we need to be working with our law enforcement communities, getting back to things like community policing. Many of our small town police forces are part-time and may not even know the members of their communities that they're tasked to serve and protect, right? We have to get back to a place where we can all work together, where we know each other and we can trust each other. So I think expanding different sets of training, making sure that there is reliable and consistent anti-bias training, discrimination training, de-escalation tactics, making sure that we are bringing social workers into the force. One thing that we've actually been talking about with a number of people is how do we possibly work in partnership with our SUNY program and make a dual major where you can get into law enforcement and also have a mental health background or social work background. That's something that's really exciting to me that we haven't really done yet. And this is the moment where we can set that up and make sure that we're building both the police force and community outreach for the future. First and foremost, I believe fundamentally that everyone deserves quality and affordable healthcare. You've heard my story about long-term care and the need for long-term care and the fact that we have an aging population in our rural communities where people who want to live home, we've got to change that structure. The New York Health Act is really exciting to me. I think there are a couple of things within the foundation of the New York Health Act that we still need to address, like long-term care. It's finally included, but right now it only says to be determined. I would like to make sure that there's a little bit more of a build out there to understand what that entails. I want to make sure that our unions are protected. Many of our union members have fought for generations to secure really quality and affordable care and healthcare. I want to make sure that they are in this type of bill, that they are covered and they're not seeing anything less. For instance, if you retire at 55 and you move to Myrtle Beach, what kind of coverage do you have for those 10 years before you're eligible for Medicare? If there's just a New York State health insurance, those are things that we can solve, but we need to solve them. And I think that once we get there, we could have a really exciting blueprint at the state level for what a single payer healthcare plan could look like. But that's why it's so important that we do it right to make sure that it's something that we can be modeled going forward.
How could the state set up its own individual single payer healthcare system while still competing with 49 other states who are still on the open market?
Well, it'll be funded with the state, and it's something, again, that we're looking into. I think that there's an opportunity here to make sure that we're providing people with better health care. We also need to make sure that the people who work in the insurance industry are taken care of too. In Kingston, in our district, there's 400 people who work in the insurance industry. And so I think working together with all of us at the table to figure out how we can bring healthcare in a meaningful way to everyone is something that we have to do. Our healthcare system at this point is broken, and so we need to fix it.
Great.
I think so. The cost of living in New York is high, and our property taxes, people in our communities are being priced out of living here. We've got to find ways that we can make it more affordable, even including things like at 65, maybe your property taxes don't increase further, right? We got to make sure that we're making it so people can live here. Right now, if owning property, we're penalized. Many people are paying more in property taxes than people in cities and who are paid or have an income of far less. And so there is an inequality system here in our property tax structure, especially as it pertains to education. And these are things that we need to look at and overhaul as best we can. So I grew up with rifles in my home. I believe responsible gun ownership and gun ownership in general is part of our upstate culture. I understand that. Quite frankly, the only way that we're going to have any amendments, if anything, is by having more upstate voices in that conference recognizing it. We know that when it was passed by people who didn't really understand gun culture. The magazine number was not something that should have ever been included, right? And so it's something that I think we look at, quite frankly. One thing that I'm interested in, if you want to have assault rifles, they could stay at a gun range. There's something that we can have behind lock and key. I don't know if we need them necessarily in our homes, but it's something that we can definitely look at for how to keep it safely at a gun range. State level, I don't believe anybody is taking guns away from people. If anything, there's going to be more of a federal legislation that impacts this at this point significantly more than the state level. Many of my friends and many of the people who live in our district are hunters, right? It's how they have food through the winter. Many of them do it for sport at gun range, right? No one is taking guns from people, but I think there are ways that we can have ownership safely and make sure that the right people are doing it safely. Red flag laws, I think, is something that's important. But, I don't think at this point, people are coming around to to collect them and change the number. But I do think that we need to look at how people are owning them and make sure that it's safe. Yeah, I think two things that we haven't talked much about are our infrastructure and broadband, as well as the environment. Both things that I think are critical for our communities. I think I touched on broadband a little bit earlier, but just we desperately need investment in our infrastructure, in our broadband services. Our communities, of course, feel left behind because we don't have access to something that in 2020 is considered a utility. And we knew it was a major issue before COVID, but it's clearly been elevated and exacerbated because of COVID, right? And you have many families who may only have one car who are deciding, do we go to work or do we bring our child to the school library parking lot, right? To be able to do their homework. That's an impossible choice and something that no one should be faced with. Thinking about telemedicine and how that could impact many of our seniors who live alone in rural communities like the hill towns. That's tremendously important. We're telling our seniors not to come into hospitals and not to go to their doctor's appointments. What are they supposed to do? If they need a medication refill, they need to call in or something is wrong. We have to make sure that we are talking about that issue. It is a gross inequity. And then additionally on the environment, we live in one of the most beautiful and special places in the world, I would argue. And the environment not only provides to our quality of life between hiking and fishing, being outside, breathing clean air, but also is key and critical to our economy, right? And constantly we see bad actors and bad corporate actors of all sizes coming in to try to ruin that. We have illegal toxic dumping happening across our communities that's impacting the water quality, impacting our air quality, ruining wetlands and the woods that people people grow up in. We also have a tremendous water quality issue. There are multiple communities across our district that don't have access to clean water, whether it's because it's been poisoned by PFAS, whether it's because it has 100-year-old water infrastructure in some cases, and other communities that still have asbestos-lined pipes. That is unbelievable that right around the watershed that provides them the cleanest water to the city, our communities don't even have clean water, right? This is something that we need to be fighting for. We need to be bringing attention to. We need to be changing.
Yeah. Let me just ask you real quick. Infrastructure is one of those things that obviously everyone agrees on, but it's also something that the federal government often picks up a portion of the tab, which is something that doesn't seem to happen much anymore. So, I mean, is that a case of the state once again having to pick up a bigger piece of that pie, or what do you see as an answer to that?
I think it is. Well, and especially for our communities, if we don't have upstate voices at the table pushing for funding for a number of different projects, they're not going to get done. Right? If we're not even recognizing, if we don't have anyone talking about the roads or the bridges or the internet service or whatever it may be in our communities because they don't have an advocate at the table, none of that's going to get done. Right? Which is just another reason why it's so fundamentally important that we have more upstate voices in the majority conference.
All right. All right. Well, this has been Michelle Hinchey, Democrat for the 46th State Senate District. Thank you so much for taking a few minutes to talk.
Thank you.